Well, welcome back to our Wednesday night Bible study. This evening we are looking at the life of Joseph. We've just begun the life of Joseph. We started this last week. We started looking at chapter 37. And we looked at the first 11 verses. What I'd like us to do is reread the text, and we'll maybe recap a little bit of where we've been, and then we'll kind of progress forward. We'll keep moving forward. So Genesis chapter 37, starting in verse 1, we'll read verses 1 through 11. It says, "Now Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojourning, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report to them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, 'Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf.' His brothers said to him, 'Are you indeed to reign over us, or are you indeed to rule over us?' So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed another dream, told it to his brothers, and said, 'Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me.' But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, 'What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?' And his brothers were jealous of him. But his father kept the saying in mind." Okay, so where have we been? Last week we began looking at this, and we saw that we're given a geographical location. Jacob's in the land of the sojournings. He's in the promised land in Canaan. The people of God at this point do not own or possess the land. They're wandering as strangers in the land. Verse 2 tells us that there's a transition. We are now leaving the focus of the story and the events. We're leaving Jacob, and we're focusing in on one of his sons, Joseph, which is the second youngest. His brother Benjamin is younger than him, but he is one of the youngest brothers. But the story is going to focus on him. Joseph is 17 years old, and it appears from the text, from the reading of the text, he's a bit immature. And I think for culturally around this time, I think it shows. He's the favorite. We know he's the favorite. Everybody knows that he's the favorite. He's got this coat of many colors, which is a big slap in the face every time his brothers see him wearing this coat. It's just a reminder. It's like pouring salt into a wound, right? It's like taking a bottle of alcohol when you've got an open cut and just pouring it into it. This is just adding more problems to the situation. Now his father Jacob, he doesn't care. Clearly he doesn't care, because he's been one who has been one who showed favoritism throughout his life. He grew up in that environment, he learned it, and now he's exemplifying this, and he also does it. He's showing favoritism, and he's teaching his other children this as well. So everybody knows that Joseph he's one of the youngest, right? So he's one of the babies of the bunch, but he's also the favorite. So there's a lot of problems that are going on here. Now, I am convinced that Joseph is a smart boy, although he's immature. He is a smart boy, and he knows his brothers do not like him. He brings bad reports about them to their father. He's a tattletale. He is just hated by them. He wears this coat of many colors, which is, just again aggravating the wound that they feel. And so this is the problem. This is over and over again as you read the text. Did you notice how many times it talks about them hating him or being jealous of him or all of that? It's just this constant repetition. They are growing in their hatred of their brother Joseph. So Joseph ends up having a dream, and he's going to tell his brothers. I think he full well knows how his brothers are going to react to him when he tells them this first dream. But even if he doesn't, they hate him. Even if he's innocent in the sense of, how they're going to react when they hear this first dream. He's certainly, in my view, he's not innocent in the second. I think he's purposefully rubbing this in their faces. And so he is acting like a spoiled child. I think that's clear from the text. He's set up. He's in an environment where, of course, he would act this way because he's been treated as the favorite. He's been shown to be the special child and gets all the special treatment and is the one who goes out and tells everything that everybody else is doing and reports it back to, his dear old dad. And so he's acting out as a spoiled child with these dreams and telling of his brothers. And we're going to see that this causes some major issues. What I'd like to talk on and touch on for a moment here is dreams and visions. We're getting into the life of Joseph, and Joseph is a dreamer. And so it's important that we take maybe a moment to think about the concept of dreams and visions. Now, up to this point in the book of Genesis, we've had about 6 dreams or visions. Now, we might want to ask, what's the difference between dreams and visions? Well, sometimes there are differences. So sometimes we can see that dreams happen when a person is asleep, and a vision when they're awake. So sometimes there's that distinction. If a person's awake and they receive this, this divine revelation, sometimes it's called a vision. And when they're sleeping, they receive divine revelation, interaction with God, and it would be called a dream. So, for example, in Acts chapter 11 and verse 4, Peter mentions being in a trance. He's awake. He mentioned being in a trance and seeing a vision. Now, again, as I read that account, it seems clear that he was awake and he got this vision. In Luke chapter 1 and verse 22, we have Zechariah. Zechariah is the father of John the Baptist, and he gets a vision. It says he gets a vision while working in the temple, or at least the people say he's got a vision. So he's clearly awake, and the people say, well, he must have gotten a vision or something along those lines. So a vision sometimes is distinguished from dreams because you're awake. Now, dreams sometimes happen when a person is asleep, right? That's typically when you dream. So in 1 Kings 3:5, God comes to Solomon in a dream at night, it says. Now, this is while he's sleeping. So again, sometimes there are differences. Sometimes we could separate the two, and we could say a vision is while a person's awake and a dream is while they sleep. But just like a lot of times with biblical words, concepts, phrases, things like that, a lot of times there's overlap, or they're used as synonyms. Sometimes you can point to passages like we just did where a vision is in the daytime and a dream is at night. But sometimes the words are used as synonyms and they overlap. So, for example, in Isaiah 29:7, the two words, vision and dream, are used together, and the meaning is that the person gets a revelation while they're sleeping. So dreams and visions are talked about as when someone's sleeping. The same is true in Job 33:15. Does the same thing. Talks about dreams and visions, and they're used synonymously, right? They're used like the person has a dream, a vision in the night. It's saying the same thing with just different words. So dreams and visions are some of the ways that God has chosen to reveal himself or reveal his will to his people. Now, up to this point in Genesis, God has used these dreams or visions to clearly convey his will. If you look back and you reread some of these texts, some of these accounts, you're going to find that God never used symbols in those dreams, right? He told people clearly and plainly what his will was. And it's unmistakable, right? It's not that it needs any kind of interpretation. You read that in the life of Abraham. God simply comes to him and tells him what he wants. He comes to Abimelech. God comes to him in a dream, tells him what he wants. Comes to Laban in a dream, tells him what he wants. So up to this point, it's been very clear, very straightforward. Now we have this transition where dreams have a symbolic aspect or nature to them, and the images in the dream now are going to need to be interpreted. So this is an important change. It's not simply God saying, A, B, and C. It's God giving a picture, right? There's a picture. There's a story in this dream or vision. And so now it's going to need to be interpreted. All right. So let's move on now, and let's continue to think about verses 12 through 36. Here's the rest of this chapter, and we'll read the whole thing. It's a little lengthy, but we'll get the whole context, and then we'll go back and we'll talk about it. So it says in verse 12, it says, "Now his brothers went to pasture their flocks near Shechem." Really briefly, you remember that Shechem was the city that the boys went in and decimated. And the people of the land now hate Jacob, and they know about him. So interesting that the brothers would go near Shechem. But anyways, his brothers, they went to pasture their father's flocks near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing flocks at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." And he said to him, "Here I am." So he said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word." So he sent them from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. Briefly, it may very well be that Jacob is really concerned about the safety of his brothers because of all the events that happened, and they're near Shechem. So he really might be sending Joseph out there, not to spy on them and bring them back a bad report, but just to make sure that everything's going well with them. That could be. That's possible here. Verse 15, and a man found him wandering in the fields. And the man asked him, what are you seeking?" "I'm seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where are they pasturing the flock?" And he said, and the man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us take him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hands to restore him to his father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing gum, balm, myrrh, on their way to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers listened to him. Then the Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and where shall I go?" Then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. And they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not." And he identified it and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him." Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning." Thus his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, the officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard. Okay. Joseph is sent by his father to go check on his brothers and to bring back a word. Again, we recognize that Joseph is the tattletale. He is the conduit. He is the informant. Now, again, Jacob may very well have been concerned about his sons being so close to Shechem. Maybe these people there are going to come out and attack him or something along those lines. We're not sure, but he sends them out, and that could be. But how many people enjoy being around a person who's always looking to find something bad to report back to others about? I mean, how many people really like to have tattletales around, to have people, taking note of everything you do, looking for you to mess up? Even if you're not a person who is out there trying to be sinful and wicked and do bad or whatever, we often do not like to be around people who are just looking for a reason to bring a bad report, right? Nitpicking everything we do, right? No one likes that. Again, even if you're not acting badly, you don't want to be around someone like that. So we can understand probably how these brothers might feel every time they see Joseph around. And they're acting, certainly, I'm sure that they're acting badly at times. So Joseph goes to Shechem, where they had originally been pasturing the flocks, but they've gone. They've left. They're not there anymore. So Joseph gets a report from a man. As he's wandering around in the field, a man comes and says, "What are you doing? What are you looking for?" He says, "I'm looking for my brothers. Do you happen to know where they're at?" And he says, "Well, they went to Dothan." So Joseph travels further on to Dothan. When Joseph's brothers see him coming, they can see him coming from a distance, right? He's wearing that coat of many colors, that big flag, right? That big flag is flowing, and they can see him from a distance coming. And what do? Well, they conspire against him. They start to plan, and they plot what they're going to do to him. And what do they want to do to Joseph? Well, they want to kill him. Have we seen a repeated theme throughout the book of Genesis of brothers fighting and even desiring to kill one another? Have we seen that? Of course we have. Absolutely. Think about this. Cain and Abel. They're brothers. Cain kills his brother Abel. Ishmael and Isaac. Ishmael hates and is mocking his brother Isaac. Now, he doesn't get an opportunity to kill him, but there's this animosity. There's this hatred that goes on between brothers. You remember Esau and Jacob. Esau wanted to kill his brother at one point, was consoling himself, was encouraging himself that once his father had passed away, that he was going to take out vengeance and kill his brother. And so he was plotting to kill his brother Jacob. And then here we have Joseph's brothers who are plotting to kill him. This hostility between brothers is going to continue to come up. And it goes all the way up to the life of Jesus. Jesus and his brothers, according to the flesh, the Jews, conspire and ultimately kill him as well. So we see this pattern. We see this pattern over and over again, especially between brothers. There's this issue, this problem, this animosity. Now, notice how Joseph's brothers refer to him. Do they say, our brother, here comes our brother? No, they say, that dreamer. Joseph has a new nickname, right? And it's one of contempt and hatred. That dreamer is coming out. That's not done with affection. They're nicknaming him, and that nickname is just, they absolutely despise him. They won't even call him their brother, that dreamer. Now, who stops the plot to kill Joseph? Because they're all plotting, right? The brothers are plotting to kill Joseph. Well, Reuben does. Reuben steps in. Now, who was Reuben? Well, he's the oldest, right? Now, he would have been responsible for this event, right? If this happened. As the firstborn, as the oldest, he would have been responsible. He's meant to be the authority figure. Now, is he? Well, he certainly is able to persuade his brothers, but it doesn't really appear that he's a man of authority. It seemed more like his brothers do what they want, and he may not have as much authority as he should. But he's able to rescue Joseph out of their hands. He's able to convince them. But you remember that Reuben, what had Reuben done in the past? What did he do? Well, you remember that he sleeps with his father's wife, one of his father's wives he sleeps with. And that right there is a horrible injustice. Now, it may be that Reuben is trying to win some favor back with his father after doing that horrible thing that he had done. Maybe he's trying to get in there, do something good, and win back a little bit of that favor and that honor that he had lost. We're not sure, but he does rescue Joseph from his brother's hands. So they end up, instead of killing him, they end up throwing him into a pit. But here's the question. What do they do after that? They're plotting and planning to kill him. Reuben comes along, says, no, don't do that. Just throw him in the pit. So they throw him in the pit, and then what do? Well, they sit down and eat. To me, there's something in that. They sit down and eat. It takes a special kind of person to plot the death of someone and then to sit down and eat. Not being bothered at all. I mean, what does this tell us about their character? Well, they're hardened, aren't they? They're callous. Their consciences have been seared, have to have been seared through the years. They have no moral compass. They could care less, right? This always reminds me, every time I read this, always reminds me of people like mobsters and gang members who can murder someone in cold blood and then they can sit down and enjoy a meal. It takes a special kind of person to do that, huh? Special kind of callous hatred. Now, as the brothers are all sitting around eating, they had to be trying to figure out what to do with Joseph, right? There's discussions going on here. If they let him go, what's going to happen, right? If they let him go, they're going to be in even more trouble, right? They're kind of getting to the point of no return. They strip their brother of this coat of many colors. They toss him in a pit for dead. They've been plotting and planning. Maybe they're going to murder him. Maybe they should go ahead and kill him after all and be done with him. They're plotting all this. If Joseph goes back home, things are probably not going to be very good. Things are going to be probably even worse for them in relation to their father. Now, as they're contemplating the death of their brother, Judah has an idea. They see some of the Ishmaelites. Now, remember, Ishmaelites come from Ishmael. They see some Ishmaelites coming. There's some traders, and they're on their way down to Egypt. And Judah says, why don't we just sell the boy, right? Why don't we make some money? He's an opportunist, right? He doesn't want to just kill the boy. If we kill the boy, we get nothing out of it, right? I mean, think about what's going on here, right? We're gonna make some money off of this guy. So let's make some money off him, right? Let's not kill him. Let's just sell him into slavery, and we'll get some money. And that's what they do. They sell him off to the relatives, right? Of course, it's many generations away, but they sell him off to the Ishmaelites, and they end up taking Joseph down to Egypt, and he's out of the promised land, right? He's removed from the promised land. Now, Reuben returns. Where was Reuben? I have no clue. I don't know what Reuben was doing. We're not told. All we know is Reuben was there for one moment, rescues Joseph in the sense that the brothers aren't going to kill him now. When they meet him, they throw him in a pit, and Reuben disappears. And then after they sell him off into slavery, here comes Reuben. Now, I don't know. Maybe he was making plans to try to get Joseph out of there. Who knows? Reuben finally shows up, and he's upset. He is not happy. But why is he upset? Why is Reuben angry? Well, it isn't because he loved and cared for his brother. Because it was because he's going to be responsible, right? What does he say? He says, where's the boy, right? He wants to know, where is Joseph? He says in verse 30, he said, the boy is gone, and I, where shall I go? We remember who Jacob was concerned about, right? Early on, when Dinah was raped and his sons slaughtered that whole city, the city of Shechem, plundered it. Who was Jacob worried about? He's worried about himself. He said, I've become a stench to these people. They're going to seek to kill me. Who's Reuben worried about, really? Well, I think it's telling. He says, the boy is gone, and I, where shall I go? I hold responsibility, but it doesn't appear, at least it doesn't appear to me, that he's really concerned about Joseph for Joseph's sake. He seems to be concerned about Joseph for Reuben's sake. Well, the chapter ends with Joseph dead in the eyes of his father. And we find out later, his brothers as well, right? They think that he's died. When they meet him later on, spoiler alert, they're going to meet him again later on in Egypt. Many years later, they think that Joseph had died. So the chapter ends. 37 ends in a very real way, symbolically, but in a very real way in the eyes of the family and of Jacob, with Joseph being dead. Joseph has been killed. Now, what have we learned from this chapter? What have we learned from these verses here, this passage? Well, a number of things, right? And you might even contemplate and come up with some others, but hatred in the heart for one's brother is murder, just as Jesus mentioned. It causes us to do all kinds of things. Unresolved hatred. We ought not to hate. And if we do, we need to repent of it. We need to work and strive by God's power and grace and mercy not to be people who hate. If you hate your brother in your heart, you have committed murder, Jesus says. And I think we see a clear example of that here. Notice that the brothers continued to grow in their hatred. They had a choice. Now, I understand Joseph and Jacob were doing things that were, aiding in the ability of the brothers to hate and be jealous of Joseph even more and more and more. But we always have a choice. We always have a choice. Those boys had a choice, and boys, yeah, they were men. Those men had a choice, and they chose to continue in hatred. Another thing we see is the way that we act impacts and teaches our children. Jacob was a schemer. He was a deceiver. And he was one who showed favoritism. And his sons really are twice as bad as he was. They're scheming, deceptive, deceitful. And they're really following after their father's footsteps in that area. What's the lesson for us? We need to be careful what we're teaching the next generation. We need to be careful, and we need to be responsible, because it's not just what comes out of our mouth, but it's how we live. You can tell your children and your grandchildren and the people around you, you can tell them, love the Lord, do good to people, don't hate. You can do all that, but if you show them with your actions hatred, envy, jealousy, deceit, gossip, slander, a lot of times actions speak louder than words. Something for us to learn here. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we can learn that you harvest what you plant. Jacob, again, was a deceiver. He deceived his father. You remember he deceives his father Isaac by wearing animal skins and pretending to be his brother Esau. Jacob's sons used the blood of an animal and the coat of many colors to trick their father. Things are bad. Things are really bad. How will the story end? Is there any hope? I mean, things look awful. They look dark. And listen, death is all around. But God is involved. God is involved behind the scenes. And when he gets involved, things change. We're going to see, and we're going to learn the lesson that God can work all things together for good. When God gets involved, all things work together for good. I'm going to leave it there, and we will pick up again next week in Genesis chapter 38. Genesis chapter 38. I hope you join us. God bless.